So my title is Who Would We Not Include? Who is not welcome? Well, fascists and Nazis, certainly, right? I'll start there. So as we get into a conversation about inclusion, especially in a Unitarian Universalist context, because inclusion is such a central aspect of who we are and how we are together, it is always the first step to say all are welcome. Inclusion is becoming a theological statement, not just an idea of like how we keep our doors open and welcome lots of people in because it's a nice thing to do. It's a theological point that we're making to say that everyone is part of this community, is welcome. God's love does not stop at the door of who we've let in. God's love includes everyone. Tolerance has long been a watchword in Unitarianism in particular for centuries. And it's included a little bit in inclusion, but here's this interesting thing. More recently, I've been hearing about the paradox of tolerance. And I had a colleague about maybe 20 years ago who got up into a pulpit and gave a sermon on the limits of tolerance, when tolerance is such a valued and highly important piece among us. To be able to get in the pulpit and say, well, now tolerance is not that great. Careful, was compelling to me. And I've bumped into a piece called The Paradox of Tolerance. I don't know if any of you have heard it. I'm suspecting several of you have. It comes out of a philosopher named Karl Popper. That essentially, if a society extends tolerance to those who are intolerant, the risk is enabling eventual dominance of that intolerance, thereby undermining the principle of tolerance. Because if you let in the intolerant, they will chase away other people. So Popper argued that a truly tolerant society must retain the right to deny tolerance to those who promote intolerance. That it doesn't lock you in to having to say all are welcome and we'll just, sure, you can bring your hate. That's, yep, come on in. We're allowed to say no to that. Now, I come at it less as a conversation of this is a principle of tolerance that we must uphold, and I bring more of a conversation of covenant. Tolerance is not a standalone virtue, but a part of an agreement of how we will support and encourage one another in our differences, so long as we are not perpetuating harm among us. That's an important distinction. There's a short story I want to offer to you. I'm not going to read verbatim because Ed Friedman was a fascinating and brilliant person, but he wasn't really a children's author. Ed Friedman was a rabbi, and he was dealt a lot with family systems theory, and he translated that into congregational systems. And one of the things that he did later in his life, this was published in 1990, was a collection of stories, because he realized that sometimes stories get through to us in a way that just me talking doesn't always do it. Well, he tells this one story, he calls it a parable, of the friendly forest. Once upon a time, there was a friendly forest where there lived a lamb who loved to frolic and eat grass. And one day a tiger comes to the forest and asks to be admitted into the friendly forest. And all of the other animals are really excited because they have other forests have tigers, but they don't have a tiger yet. And so they're like, wow, yeah, we'd love to have a tiger join our friendly forest. Now remember, this is a friendly forest. And so they invite the tiger in. And the lamb, in a sheepish way, says, I'm not so sure about this. And all of the other creatures say, oh, relax, we'll just explain to the tiger how things are done here. It's going to be okay. So the lamb went about her life as usual, but it was not long before the tiger began to growl and make threatening gestures, menacing motions, and each time the frightened lamb went to her friends and said, "It's very uncomfortable for me to be here in the forest," and her friends would reassure her, "Don't worry, we'll talk with the tiger." That's just how tigers behave. You just need to be reasonable. So there is a piece in liberalism, and in particular in our liberal religion, of wanting to talk through things and to be okay with some trouble. And conflict is not really something we want to, no conflict, no trouble, lamb. In the story as it unfolds, eventually the lamb goes to her friends and says, "Look, I'm going to leave. I just can't keep doing this. This is not good for me." And the tiger hasn't eaten the lamb. It's not like the violence has happened. It's just always there, right? So the lamb says, "I'm going to leave." And her friends are like, no, listen, we'll talk. How about we arrange a conversation? and the last line, though one of the less subtle animals in the forest, more uncouth in expression and unconcerned about who remained, was overheard to remark, "I never heard of anything so ridiculous. If you want a lamb and a tiger to live in the same forest, you don't try to make them communicate, you cage the bloody tiger." And actually, the picture on the front is the tiger and the lamb. So this was the parable that he decided was going to be on the front cover. There's about 2 or 3 dozen of these little parables in there. So as Dylan mentioned, and perhaps you remember right at the beginning during the announcements, we say every week, "All are welcome who come in peace." For several years, we would just say, "All are welcome." And we had an experience as a congregation where we had to navigate a difficulty where somebody was saying a lot of homophobic statements and making some comments that were hurtful. And it was hard because this person was a member of the congregation, and several people really liked this person. And ultimately, the congregation made a choice to tell this person they were no longer a member and they needed to leave. It wasn't the first thing that this congregation did for this person. There were steps along the way. Please change your behavior. All right, let's get together and talk. That actually was one of the steps. And it's in our policies now that would be a step, right? Let's be reasonable. Let's actually name that there has been harm done and offer each other an opportunity to address this together. That's how we do inclusion. I want you to know that as we go into a time in the life of our country where there's a lot of trauma, there is a lot of hurt happening. As a community, there will be times when one or another of you will be hurt by one or another of the people who are in the room now. Because we are a thriving community. And we practice inclusion. We keep our door open. And we are a space for second chances, a space for grace to be made real. And if there is something that hits somebody in a hurtful way, we're going to take a step to figure out what happened, how can we do this better, how can we all move into a space where there's less harm. Because all are welcome who come in peace. And that doesn't mean we won't make mistakes. We are a community filled with mistakes and missteps and foibles and flaws because we are a community of thriving human beings. That's what it means to be here. And we have a way to keep moving forward together, not because anyone in this room is expected to be perfect, because we are expected to step closer to each other when there is trouble. We are a community of second chances and extra grace. We are a place that honors missteps and mistakes, fumbles and flaws, because such things are included in the full process of growth and learning and thriving together. So we recognize that sometimes we'll be hurt and that we have ways of supporting each other, working through that faithfully, up to and including telling someone that they are not welcome if they are not willing to take part in the repair of harm that is being caused. I just want you all to know that that's part of what it means to be here. That you will be protected. You might not be safe. That's not what I'm promising. But you will be held. You will be heard. And we will work to make things continue to thrive. That's what we mean by inclusion. That's what we mean by beloved community. When we gather together and we say, all are welcome who come in peace. I invite you to step closer and to be real and authentic with each other, even if it's a bit of a risk. Because all are welcome who come in peace. In a world without end, may it be so. Please join